Good afternoon. On behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank, we welcome you to the event Using Geolocation Technology to Fight COVID-19 and Climate Change. A conversation between IDB President Luis Alberto Moreno and Jack Dangermond, President of the industry-leading company Esri, on how geographic information technology can help solve some of the world's biggest problems. The event will be in English with interpretation into Spanish. Para escuchar el evento en español, haga clic en el icono del mundo que encontrará en la parte baja de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma. Please send your questions to paulc@iadb.org. President Moreno, please go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a true privilege and a pleasure to welcome Jack Dangermond, and his company's technology is something that we all live by today. We probably are not as aware of it. Jack's the founder of a company called Esri. It is the world's leader in geographic information systems, and location intelligence and mapping technology are the things that today we must live with. And actually, location intelligence is the ability to analyze and to find spatial patterns in data that help us understand our world better. Esri uses a combination of local data and advanced geospatial tools. And their software is equally deployed in more than 350,000 organizations, including 90 of the 100 Fortune top companies. It is equally used in all in over 50 government U.S. states and many of the governments around the world. Their technology is equally critical for the Internet of Things, something that the world is seeing how it is expanding at a geometric rate, and equally in advanced analytics and other digital solutions. Jack believes that technology is successful to the extent that it empowers people and help us bring us together. I think this is a great way of looking at how he has been able to have such a huge imprint on his company and what his company does, because essentially it is all about technology for the good. And this is what he's done in the way of helping solve one of the biggest problems humanity has faced in really almost 100 years, and that is the COVID crisis. We were able to join with Esri earlier in May to provide free access to geospatial technology in response to COVID, and how we dealt with this emergency in Latin America and the Caribbean. And because of that, governments in the region are able today to use custom COVID-19 solutions to track the availability of what typically is called PPE, that is medical equipment, managing supply chains, and maintaining business continuity. The other part that is equally important, that I've seen it firsthand, is Esri's disaster response program. I've seen it in many of the islands in the Caribbean, in Central America, and it is used very much for the specific needs of IDB countries that allow us to offer the access to this technology and help the region address equally the healthcare crisis. Our governments are using Esri's analytical models, the dashboard technology, the control centers to monitor the spread of the virus and identify where best to do intervention. And as most of you have seen this technology at work in our IDB coronavirus dashboard, most famously, Johns Hopkins University's COVID dashboard is amazing. It's got, Jack was reminding me, over 3 million hits an hour, and has been visited more than 1 trillion times. More than 3,700 organizations are using Esri coronavirus sites. And the IDB, working with Esri on several important projects, including the Hospital Resource Agile Management tool that I just mentioned. This allows health ministries to track hospital beds, intensive care units, respirators, and other things. We're actually doing a program together in Honduras where we're using the Esri technology to analyze georeference data relative to poverty, to schools and education, which is an area that we will talk today with Jack, and really is dealing with so many challenges that we have today. So welcome, Jack, and tell us a little bit about what's behind all of these dashboards, all these magnificent things that we all try to look every day how we're doing as it relates to the COVID crisis. And tell us how's been this evolution for you and how quickly you were able to really power this engine of the Johns Hopkins dashboard.
Well, thank you, Luis, and thank you very much for inviting me to have this conversation. This partnership with IDB has been very powerful because working with you, we've been able, as you mentioned, to get our technology out to many. And that's been empowering. And that's sort of our basic philosophy is we are tool builders, and our main focus is to help our users do their work better. Those words are really important to sort of understand about our philosophy as we work on building advanced tools that help our users do their work better. In this situation, it took everybody by surprise, obviously, and so we've had to implement this technology quickly around the world to get people to address the issue locally, because this is a local issue. And the main vision is to create, you use the word understanding, and this is the idea, is GIS technology is an understanding technology. It helps you visualize and understand relationships, patterns, processes, and the great work of Johns Hopkins was done by a graduate student, believe it or not, with his lab director, who put this little system together of a dashboard. And he had the idea that he could get the best available open source data, assemble it into this dashboard, and then publish it. And I don't think he had any idea of the immense power that would come out of it, because the world grew to understand through this dashboard what was going on. I mean, even I talked to the head of the WHO, and he said, Jack, I want a dashboard like that for WHO. And of course, we helped him build it, but by that time, the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, and there was millions of maps being made every day. So a modest means person was able to assemble the data and change the world. And from my perspective, the change in the world was to bring about geographic literacy, because people started to see, they saw the world through a map. They saw the science of geography, of this integrative science, through a map. It's kind of like a language of geographic phenomena. So all the science came together through this visual medium. Once that started to happen, they opened up their platform in such a way that local ministries of health and different companies in different cities and different regions could take a feed and mix it with their own data of cases, and it just came together to be amazing. So it started with understanding, Luis, the information, and I'm sure you've looked at it, and you understood not just what's happening locally, but you understand how it trended, how it happened. But then once they got the pattern of geography matters, then they were able to start targeting, like forecasting where the disease is going to spread and the volume. You've seen these curves. So integral in a GIS is the ability to do the forecasting. They call it epi curves, forecasting what's going to happen. And seeing that spatially for the first time mattered, because that meant they could understand and forecast where the impacts are going to be in relationship to hospitals, and understand capacities of hospitals in relationship to what the curve is going to do. And that started thinking, oh man, this is a way to, it's not only a lens to see what's going on and understand what's going on, but also to forecast and then allocate resources. Where should we put more hospitals? Where should we put testing sites? Where should we address closing down areas, closing down the economy because it's just festering out and hotspots were there. So it became kind of a framework for policy people, at least in some countries, to understand and act in the appropriate way. So yeah, you sort of scratched a nerve for me. This is and I'm sorry to go on and on about it, but I think it's one of the great achievements of my life to watch geography come alive and become a central focus for the way that we understand and manage our world.
Jack, speaking of which, as I listen to you, one of the big anxieties everybody has is, I'm sure it happens in your organization, people wonder, when do they go back to the office? And equally, when do their children go back to school? And these are the two big unknowns. And clearly you've been working in helping companies in the back to the office type of question. And we, for instance, actually were supposed to go back to the office this coming week, but we basically looked at a number of variables, including a 7-day moving average of how cases are moving, and does it make sense or not. But then when people actually get to the office, the kinds of protocols that you have to do, walk us through some of the things that you have been doing in using GIS to help companies think through how do they bring people back to the office.
Yeah, first off, let's just acknowledge that we don't know what the hell is going on, actually. And, we come up with a policy statement, well, we're all going to go back by August, or at the end of the year, it's going to be over. And then all of a sudden, it starts skyrocketing. I work closely with the governor here in California, and I mean, he's caught between two very difficult situations. Should we go back? Should we open up? And a lot of that decision-making has to do with capacity of hospitals and able to, deal with the disease. And so it's like two big dials that people are dealing with. And then there's the issue that this is variable based on location. And we're discovering, actually for the first time, that policies about staying closed down do impact the spread of the disease. We know this. So as they open up, there's more disease that spreads. So, and then that happens differentially. In some of your countries, we're seeing that people had more liberal policies and they're really in trouble. And the same is true here in the United States with different states, and same with different cities. So politicians are in a very difficult situation. So mapping gives us a frame to understand social movement, because of our cell phone can be tracked generally, not personally, but we can see cell phone moving around as policies change, it opens up, and then we see disease break out. So we're beginning to understand that as a pattern, just as a science pattern. And so certain hotspots, like in Bogota or in Buenos Aires or other cities, they're saying these blocks are really hotspots, keep them shut down. That's sort of at a mega scale. But then many companies, offices particularly, want to bring some people back. And they're making that difficult decision, just like the governor is, of bringing them back carefully. And that really requires certain policies about social distancing. I've been very reluctant to do it here. We have about 4,500 employees in our ecosystem in the US, and about the same amount outside the US. And we're just not interested to bring them back because we're able to do, like you are doing, work remotely, and it's been able to be effective. But then there's some companies that really want to bring it back, and that's an internal policy question. So we have an indoor GIS system because spatial matters, getting close to somebody, et cetera, matters. So by being able to build an indoor GIS, we can look at and assess different offices, particularly this is important in open office systems, about proximity association of people. People are starting to do what's called office hoteling, and they move in and out of an office for a few days a week, and they're sharing office spaces and cleaning them in between. So how do you organize that? It's not just abstract policies, it comes down to spatial stuff. And we've been able to build models and visualize these and make them available to employees in companies that actually matter. So I don't know if that really responds to your question. I'm talking really about a mega scale and also a micro scale. And these are all important. And as managers, you have to take some responsibility, just like states or nations, they come up with policies and they work or they don't know. Likewise, inside of a business, you need to be careful. And we're dealing with human lives here. And we're dealing with unknowns. So my own feeling is be very cautious. I'm not anxious to bring people back, but I also realize the realities of keeping businesses running. In our case, we're very fortunate because we can operate digitally and at a distance, but that's not always the case.
That's exactly right. One one of the most fascinating things to watch is how, because of the data sets that you produce, you have a profession such as the economics profession, which typically looks back at data sets that are, set in time. So an economist, like immunologist, can take live data and begin to think of solutions. And speaking earlier this week with Angus Deaton, the famous US Nobel Prize winner for economics, who has done a lot of issues around behavioral sciences and especially why people die early, etc. I asked him, what do you feel, how are you optimistic? And he says, look at the data sets I produced from this morning. And I think that is going to revolutionize how we think about, not only the economics profession, but in other professions, of how to make wiser decisions. Tell us how you have seen this evolving, because I'm sure with all the NGOs that you work with, all the different professions, and especially with your spirit of really doing something about improving the state of the world around things like the Sustainable Development Goals.
Well, you're talking, I think, about data-driven policy making and data-driven decision making. And we're all living in an age where that really is very impactful and people demand it. In the public sector, particularly, they're demanding it. And some of my customers are very advanced in that area, and some of them are sort of going blind about data-driven policy making. And it brings up a lot of issues about transparency and the responsibilities of leadership to be able to make their decisions transparent in the context of data-driven decision-making. We are clearly wiring up the world so that everything that moves and changes is measured. That's just an abstract idea. That means every movement, and in geographic space, that means cars moving, maps are now different than they used to be. They're not paper maps, they're digital maps, and every change in forestry, every tree that's lost in the Amazon, for example, can be measured within a day or two, and the world can know. But sometimes that's, from a policy perspective, people try to hide that. So the great movement that's occurring and the SDGs with the UN are really highlighting this. The great movement that's occurring is measuring within the SDG frame change. And whether it's social change, women in politics, whether it's economic change, whether it's environmental change, those are being measured systematically, statistically, and then made available in dashboards. Now that hasn't all come together yet, but the UN is very active in making that occur. And my great hope is that as people see the world like they did with COVID, they will understand all its relationships and they'll come to realize that it's all interrelated. I mean, the world is a living world and we're part of it. And so it's changing and evolving. And having what I call a generation of kids that learn geography at an early age, they understand all these relationships, that we are all part of a broader ecological system. That will, I think, cause social revolution. It'll cause certainly social transformation so that people begin to demand of their leadership, not sort of that they take the right decisions, and geography again is the frame to be able to organize and communicate that. Let's take a look at President Obama. He was a great leader, as you know, and when the recession hit, he gave out about $800 billion of relief funds to the United States. It was an economic stimulus. And he asked us, along with the Vice President at the time, Joe Biden, to be able to make a map that would show as dots every single grant that was given, every allocation. And then make that map public so that the citizens could look at the map and touch a dot in their neighborhood or in their city and say, is this dot, this money being given because it's the brother-in-law of the mayor or something like that, some political thing? Or is it a rational decision? And so there were millions of people that interacted with that map. And they later began to build maps about need, like where are the grade averages lower in certain geographies. And then where did the money go? So this connection of rational thinking, rational spatial thinking, and then accountability became available through mapping. So I see a day where politicians will be accountable to not only data-driven decision-making, but also holistic understanding of where the needs are. So a lot of maps across Latin America and in your constituents are I just see an age where maps could become the frame. So, you know, economics and geography, they've never gotten along. Back in the academy, these are two different disciplines. And economists say, well, we don't know anything. Numbers, that's what we care about. Forecasts with numbers. And so that lack of literacy has, spatial literacy in the economic field has led to a lot of misconceptions about what's going on. So maps provide us the ability to look at the interrelationships in data, be able to make wall-to-wall projections rather than statistical projections about big areas. My good friend, Jeffrey Sachs, who's the great economist up there in New York, understands this. He was at Harvard when I was there, and he said, no, we never took any geography classes. We never knew anything about geography. It took him 20 years to wake up to when he was in Bolivia doing some of his work there. Bolivia is sort of handicapped because it has it's high elevation and it has no seaports. So the lack of access and connectivity to the rest of the world has, in a way, handicapped it. But you see that through the lens of geography. So I want economists to get it. I want them to I want them to understand the science of relationships of all sciences, geography. So I want a map in front of all that statistical data that you guys do so well. And I think the bank needs this lens as well. There should be a map in front of the data because it not only brings about understanding, but it also brings about rational ability to target and evaluate the consequences of different things. I'm sorry to go on and on here. You have a bunch of questions here that are targeting me. You're pushing me.
No, but this is precisely what I want because I love that all the economists in the bank are listening to you. I'm not an economist by training, but I am convinced that the profession as such, the better economists are those who understand these kinds of issues and can combine the sociological challenges that we have, especially at this time, because these whole changes and, this is where areas like behavioral economics have become so important and these areas where we're working. Talk to us a little bit about education. I mean, this is the big system. Somehow, everybody talks about education all the time. We know it's the big equalizer. We know that in education, you have magnificent experiences that maybe get to 1,000, 2,000 students, but somehow we can never get it up to 1 million or 2 million.
Yes.
How are you seeing, because of everything that you've learned in the past few months, because if nothing else, I think digital literacy has increased significantly, not because we wanted to learn, because we had no option but to learn. So
yes.
Walk us through how you are seeing and how you envision changes in education and perhaps moving, I think, more and more into some kind of hybrid system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let me just finish one last thought that came to mind, and that is that economists know something called cost of externalities. They optimize for one sector, and then they ignore the rest, and they say, well, that external influences. Geography doesn't have that concept. It brings it all together holistically. So just for the economists in the bank, know that there is a way to deal with costs of externalities in holistic ways. Social costs, education costs, environmental costs. It brings it all together into one holistic modeling capability. But on education, it's again an area that I strongly believe in, which is building the next generation of spatially literate children. And geography is the science of our world. It actually integrates all the other sciences, geology, climatology, sociology, economics. It brings it all together spatially so that you can see the whole. Just like children go outside and they see like behind me here on the campus, they see everything. They see it's interrelated. It's a very intuitive thing for us as human beings, but we get specialized into various sectors. We have been experimenting for about 25 years with kids in K through 12 education schools, and we find that at about the 5th grade or 6th grade, kids become spatially literate. So we began to provide GIS tools to these children, and they began to do what I would call project-based learning. They would look at a problem in their neighborhood, and they would map that problem. And that was really very effective. For example, in Detroit, we had kids that mapped lead poisoning in the city. And then they got motivated, like, let's get the lead out. It's very interesting. And they went out and developed a program using maps to target the areas of high lead concentration. And then they scraped all the lead paint off the walls, and they got the lead out. These were inner city kids in Detroit some years ago. And the result was they all got more literate. They all went to college. They all got a degree. This was sort of my first realization that if kids are given the right tools and they're given the right contextual motivation, they will learn. They learned computing, they learned math, they learned mapping, they learned analytics, but they also learned the social inequities that were going on in Detroit with respect to race and economic equity. And they learned all that without really somebody teaching them in a class. It was holistic teaching and holistic understanding. So that drove me again to push this as a program of Esri. I mean, Esri is just a business. We build software technology. And I would like to think that we are a decent business to do work. But we also have this whole dimension of not philanthropy, but involvement in communities. And one of those is education. So with President Obama, again, we made a partnership to get our tools into every K through 12 school in America free. They had, of course, buy the hardware and now cloud services, but the basic curriculum and software was given away for free. And that now reaches about 250,000 students every year, between 250,000 and 300,000. You need to have teachers that can actually develop curriculum that can get it out, but that's now been moving along. Last year, we decided to do the same thing for the rest of the world. So listen to me carefully. Every K through 12 school can get access to our cloud-based software and learning materials now anywhere in the world. This includes all of your areas. And we need leadership. This year, we've made a new partnership with the National Geographic Society to build curriculum in various languages that can address this work. And so my partners across Latin America, and there are about 1,200 people there in different countries, are working, doing their best, but there isn't really the leadership that we need to really make this thing transform like we did here in the U.S. And in the U.S., there's a long ways to go, but it's a beginning. And I truly believe that by building this next generation of geospatially literate kids, they'll go back, you know, Luis, like you were saying, be more attuned to the idea of data-driven decision making. They'll see and connect things in various ways. And there's a lot to do here, but you know, I need partners to be able to help me on that. And I really want to say thank you for the IDB's partnership, but we got more to do, Luis.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me ask you on this part of education, do you find that with all these tools, you have more people wanting to self-learn as a result, or does it still, you have to have a heavy guidance? What has been your experience looking at this?
Yeah, there is a relationship between how hard it is to learn the technology and how many people get involved in it. That's one factor. So we are making this stuff easier and more accessible. Yeah, it is helpful to have what I call a geo mentor. And we work a lot with our users to adopt a school and adopt a teacher to help them get going. But it's becoming easy enough. Once kids get the sense of what this is about, it's like the lights go on in their head, and then it's hard to hold them back. They start doing projects, they start working on their own. It's also something in universities. We have, I think, about 11,000 universities around the world. And actually, I just hesitate to say this, but one of the obstacles now is the teachers are not keeping up with the technology. So they teach the old way and the students are going around the teachers and they're learning faster. So we also have a program for this year, just announced, every student on the planet can actually have access to our software in the higher ed categories. And I think that's going to accelerate them learning on their own. And this means kids in economics, kids in sociology, not just kids in geography. Geography is sort of a sector name, but it's really geo-enabling all kids across the university. And once they see the power of problem solving, needs analysis, targeting, evaluation, numbers, policy maps, story map, all that power, they take off. They become animals, running because it's so exciting. I mean, what turned me on 50 years ago, frankly, Luis, was this sort of, I realized what was going to happen. And now what I see is that young kids are bypassing their traditional education materials and they're saying, wow, I could do something with this, and build a career. And the career isn't just in GIS, it's career in forestry or career in water or career in utilities or career in government. It's just being empowered by a tool.
And do you, we all talk about STEM, and certainly, for some of us where math was a problem back when we were in high school, when those kids look at all the tools that you have, do you see them wanting to learn more about STEM? Not because somebody told them that they should take those disciplines, but rather because they find that they're critical for their own education?
Yeah, I think STEM is a category, and as as adults, we sort of organize, okay, you need STEM as a categorization of things. But the reality is that those kids in Detroit that I mentioned, they learned computing on their own because they were excited that they could solve a problem of get the lead out. They learned math. They learned communication skills. They made these maps, they presented them to their mayor and their city council in Detroit, and the city council got them $300,000 to hire all the kids in school to be able to scrape all the paint off. These kids learned how to be, citizens. They learned how to participate in democracy. They did that all on their own. And so there are programs for STEM, and you do A plus B plus C, and then you get there. What I'm saying is I'm a great believer in project-based learning. You learn on the job, and whether it's how to shelf in a store or whether it's how to do accounting, you actually learn on the job a lot. So if we can introduce that kind of science and technology into a school where kids learn on their own around a real project, they get so much more excited. And they learn, STEM is integral into, you learn science by doing. You learn science by observing and putting the data together and doing the analytics and doing the interpretations, making the maps. You learn science there, you learn technology there, you learn all of it. So that's my own philosophy. I'm not saying that the classic STEM programs, and that's how you do organized funding and so forth, are bad. They're fantastic. I'm just saying that this technology is really exciting to me in that regard, and I have real evidence that this works.
That's great. Well, we have a lot of questions coming in, and here's one for you, Jack. Can you give us some examples of how, over the course of your career, the use of GIS has changed perceptions about deforestation and government actions to prevent it?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, one is in India. In the 80s, some people may know that forest loss was happening at an accelerated rate. And so the government, very enlightened Minister of Forestry there, took satellite imagery and GIS and started to build maps showing forest loss. And those maps were communicated out to everyone, all the policy people, of course, but also to the citizens. And the citizens were responsible for some of the forest decay because they were informal and cutting forest. It shut down. The forest loss shut down, and there has been a very positive story in the recent decades of forest regeneration. And we must do this as a society. We need to make everybody aware. And that's hopefully what will come out of the work with the UN on the SDGs. similar to the program that we did with you, Luis, on the getting the software out to organizations for COVID. We're doing the same thing, especially in the developing countries, with software sets to be able to support the SDG reporting. Mexico is one of the leaders here in this regard, the Philippines, Senegal, others, and they're working closely with the UN to take and build their SDG reporting in their statistical organization in the country, but then create a system of systems with data reporting up to the UN to create a global view of what's going on.
I have another question from Jamaica. He says, why are we not seeing more GIS intensity maps in the media showing the spread and the concentration of COVID-19 infections?
You mean traditional media, I suppose, like newspapers?
I imagine that's what he's, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some of it happening. The New York Times is doing a good job, and there are others. It's sort of shifted over to the web. Yeah, there's dashboards and maps that are showing. I can't tell you how many billions of maps are made every day and viewed by people about what's going on with COVID. And it is changing the world. It's changing people's perception about what's going on. But look, COVID is one example. A friend of mine showed me this cartoon of this wave of COVID that's impacting people. But behind that wave, there's another bigger wave, which is the economic wave that's going to come as a result of COVID. And then behind that, there's another wave. It's a bigger wave, which is climate change. And then behind that, there's a bigger wave of loss of biodiversity. I mean, loss of biodiversity is just like COVID. It's going to threaten us. I mean, it threatens. I mean, I get it. I see it through my lens that is going to rob us of our future. So there is a movement to be able to set aside 30% of the planet, or my friend E.O. Wilson says 50% of the planet, and keep it in a state so we can be sustained. I mean, it's like preserving your lungs, right? You don't keep cutting away your lungs, you're going to die, you can't breathe anymore. So that's what's happening at a planetary level. And we're way overshot with respect to the ecology being able to sustain us. We've robbed our kids' future. That's gonna cost them maybe their lives. Well, I don't want to be an alarmist, but our world at this particular point is in trouble with a whole bunch of these interrelated waves of things that are going to create some very serious problems for all of us. So COVID, in a way, the positive news about COVID is through mapping and data, we're beginning to see that we're all interrelated, and we're interrelated with our environment. So it's waking the world up to, and here I just say mapping and geography are essential to be able to bring together and understand all these complex interrelationships and then translate them into action. It's not enough to say, oh, I'm reading the paper. Oh, yeah, there's so many more people. I mean, here in my community, a person dies about every hour from COVID. And, you know, I'm sort of sitting here comfortably terrified. And what the maps are doing is showing the world that this is a serious thing. It's going to affect all of us. And hopefully we're going to have a vaccine. But these broader issues, we also need to pay attention to. We need to have the same kind of mobilization in thinking and operations like we're doing with COVID. Everybody's got to go in. Everybody's got to wear a mask. Everybody's got to stop carbon pollution of our atmosphere. Everybody's got to help either plant trees or stop the destruction of the Amazon or other huge ecological lungs that we all depend upon. If we don't do that, we are doomed. It's like walking in public now, assuming no masks and no, it's not going to get me. Nuts! People are nuts. And we've got to really raise the bar in terms of understanding. The understanding precedes action. That's a human trait. So what I'm talking about here, Luis, is an understanding language that precedes action. And just like COVID, we created understanding, and then we can act.
Absolutely, and you know, as I listen to you, clearly COVID surprised us, but climate change has been knocking on our door for a long time. And in a
Yes.
related question is in terms of the health of our oceans and the human impacts of overfishing, of plastic waste, of coral bleaching. The question is, what is GIS capable of helping with those kinds of problems?
Yeah. Well, first, it's just like with COVID, it helps us understand the problem and communicate the problem to everybody else, because it's going to take an army to address these complex issues. So the first one is understanding and communication. The second is geographic targeting. In the case of loss of biodiversity, it's picking out the areas that we need to put into high priority zones. And I know that the bank and your colleagues have been working very aggressively to stimulate NGOs and governments to wake up to saying this area should be put in conservation. This has been a real passion of my own personal life, but it needs to be a passion of everyone's life. And I think smoking, for example, showed us that this is possible. People stop smoking when they realize it kills them because of cancer. And so as a societal reaction, we need to have that same kind of bringing together. Targeting the areas that are most important. We need to shut down and go to a zero carbon emission society at the global level. I'll just say it. And there's nothing against using carbon as an in-between period, but we've got to move to sustainable energy usage in our society. That's what will stop the climate change, and that means everybody buying into it. Plastics, that's like stop polluting. It's like you don't trash your own house. No, we've got to stand up and do that. GIS is not an answer to it, but we can understand the problems. We can understand the problems of coral bleaching or polluting the sea by using these maps to create broader understanding. But then we need action, and those actions are not, technology is not the only thing, right? Science and technology are just instruments in the hands of humans that then must act. We must organize at the societal level to be able to take this valuable data-driven science and information and do something with it. That's up to individuals.
Like another question coming in is about urban mobility, and you know well that all the capitals around Latin America, with the big changes, you know, in terms of a wealth effect that was created and unfortunately is now being tremendously challenged because of COVID. Clearly, there's big problems of urban mobility, and the question here is if you can give some examples of how you're helping map vehicle movements and help better traffic patterns, better ways of dealing for mayors and others to deal with problems of mobility and pollution.
Yeah, so we are wiring up, as I mentioned earlier, everything that moves and changes. And so we can see congestion issues that really feeds planners making better decisions about transportation alternatives. We must move to more efficient transportation. In the short time, we've worked with a lot of transportation trucking companies to optimize. For example, many people know FedEx or UPS. Last year, UPS saved $400 million. This is money now, it's economics, by using our tools to optimize the routing. So that's a very, very focused application. Supply chain optimization will be critical. So there's no one single bullet here of solutions to climate change or the issues of transportation congestion in cities, but every bit helps. If I can save 15% of the fuel usage or 20%, and I can make things more efficient, that helps. And geography and GIS is really critical to that. Transportation planners use GIS to be able to model interaction between different groups and then plan solutions, whether they be public transit or private road information, to be able to be more optimum. So I think generally we're saying more optimization is the name of the game, and geography matters in this regard. Same in commercial activities. People like Starbucks, they locate all their stores using optimum tools that look at all the relationships between demographic and traffic. Oh, that's a good place, or that's not a good place. And same thing with large retailers. People like in the United States here, Walmart is one of the great retail stores that uses geography to be able to make decisions. So this is available to the big companies of the world, but through public-private sharing of open data, it's also winding up, like in our Census Bureau's case, they're providing geographic information to small businesses, so they can also get the geographic advantage. These are important things from a commercial perspective. Geography matters.
Sure. Another interesting question here is, given artificial intelligence and machine learning, the models that are predicting based on past data, and there is no recent past like today's present. Could you elaborate on how Esri has experienced in recent months, and how are you planning to adjust and redeploy Esri with AI and machine learning models as societies enter into a new normal?
Yeah, we put AI and machine learning into our basic product. So a lot of people think of AI and machine learning as something separate science tools like statistics or something. And I think that's healthy. Certainly the research community is doing it at many different scales. But what we decided to do is say, look, these are capabilities that all GIS users should be able to have. So collecting training sites, doing statistical analysis, making forecasts, let's just put it inside of the tool so that our millions of users can just use it as another capability. So everything gets smarter. The maps get smarter, the models get smarter. We can look to the future now in smarter ways. So my own view of AI and machine learning is it's exotic in a way, but it's actually essential in the realm of computing. And this is impacting in health and medicine and telemedicine and various things. We're using regression models and statistics to be able to make advanced interpretations almost dynamically. So that's my view of AI and machine learning, and we're active in it. We have a whole research center that does it. I just mentioned, Carlos, that Esri is a very successful company. One of the reasons why we are successful is we take about a third of our revenue and we pour it into R&D. So we have research centers around the world, but also our headquarters, the main one is over there in building M. And we sort of hemorrhage money on advancing the methods. And one of those advancing methods is AI and machine learning.
You know, I know we're getting close to the end, but I can't help by asking you. I mean, you've been leading Esri for 50 years. You've been in a sector that is seeing the most fascinating change in technology, in acceleration of technology. Tell us about your leadership and your leadership style, and the 2 or 3 tips that you would give anybody, because you are fundamentally in a change type of organization permanently. And that adjustment is not easy. We as humans have a hard time changing our own habits. So let alone, you know, in a big organization like the one you lead. Tell us some of the things that you've been able to do and you never listed your company and you didn't take venture capital. I mean, you were very much a different kind of entrepreneur with a real sense of purpose, which I'm sure is what really drives people to be part of Esri. But some of the tips of effective leadership that you could share with us.
I don't know if I have any real gems of wisdom. I can tell you how I think. I grew up in a very poor family and my parents were servants. So part of me is about a sense of being in service. And that's, some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you will not. When you grow up in service, then you think about others and you think about how you can help them. So part of my DNA is being interested, not interesting. So it's like I'm always interested in problems that other people have or issues that they have. So it's just sort of like, so around here we often say it. We simply say the purpose of Esri is very important. It is to be in service to our users. And there's all kinds of names that have come up over the last couple decades about that, you know, a purpose-driven company or something. It's just sort of like, we're not fancy about it or philosophical about it. It's just the purpose of our organization is important. And the reason why we never went public is I don't want this organization to be in service to stockholders. I mean, That's fine. I don't have anything going on with me about that, but I don't want to be that. I want to be in service to things that matter. And that really is in service to our users who have great challenges and problems. So it's a funny organization. I don't know if I could recommend it for everybody, but it has certainly made us very focused and driven our operation. So we haven't gone public, you're right. I have no interest in that. I have interest in making my life, but also my colleagues around me have a sense of purpose this way. We can team, we can work like hell. I mean, this is no cushy place. I mean, people really work hard here because they are in service to greater missions. So people don't want to buy our tools because of some greater purpose. They buy it because it helps utilities do their work better. It helps cities do their work better. It helps business do their work better. They drive efficiency or better decision-making or more communication. That's why people like our tools. And at the same time, we think here about the greater challenges that are facing all of us and craft our tools and also our service to our users in such a way that it can help address those bigger problems. So it's a complex thing. I don't borrow money, so you probably don't like me in a way, Luis, because we don't do money with banks. We don't deal with them. We've never borrowed money, not in 51 years. And the reason is because then we'd be in service to the bank. It's not your particular bank, but that's just a philosophy. And it frees me of the issues of stockholders and the issues of being burdened by things that I don't care about. So I can spend money on the things that really my customers really need to have done, advancing tools. So also this philosophy of spending all of our excess money on advancing the fundamental platform is very important. And so we have a culture here of science-based development and high-quality engineering. Those are the things that really drive us. And then we also just, we pay everybody well here. They all work on an hourly basis. A very funny little trick of saying you're rewarded right away when you work 90 hours in a week, which frequently people do, on passionate things. So it's a very fair and equitable company. And I'm not saying we're perfect because we make lots of mistakes. I do that, through my career. But we intend to do well. And we are a prosperous business. I mean, there's just no arguing about that. And we've been very successful because of those. I don't know if that answers your question, Luis. It's kind of an awkward question.
It does, and I really want to thank you for a fascinating conversation. And I think you put, your whole sense of purpose, your service to others, is what is so much lacking in the world. And I think if there is a lesson coming out of COVID, is that as societies, we have to think in those terms.
Yeah.
If we think in those terms, this huge amount of waves that you were referring to, we're going to be able to meet those challenges.
Yeah.
And we're not.
It's going to take every bit of our science and every bit of our technology, but also all of our human will to overcome these issues. I mean, it isn't going to just happen. It isn't a technical answer. It's got to take people that are creative and move into action. This is essential. And having the sense, and I get a sense from you, Luis, that you get this, having a sense of people that are interested in doing something, and then, well, you must make decisions, all kinds of decisions all the time. You have to make these decisions. I make maybe 20 or 30 decisions every day. There's no big decisions. It's all those little transactional decisions that support this idea that we need to work together and we need a team together at this important time if we're going to create a future for our planet.
Well, thank you so very much, Jack. You have really inspired all of us, and it's been a real privilege. Congratulations for everything that you're doing. As I listen to you, and I remember, you go here to the U.S. Library of Congress, which is such a magnificent place, and you look at all these old maps, and I remember how, before Columbus and how the world would look like, and as I heard you make those maps visible, I could only imagine what humanity would have been had it had some of the tools that you've developed. But it's really been a fascinating conversation. I really thank you for your time, but more importantly for what you're doing at our partnership.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, I think our company is going to become an instrument, has become an instrument of evolution. That's not us, it's the technology of what we bring, and the science of what we're bringing is affecting the evolution of what's going to happen on the planet. And it'll either go bad, or it'll be really the cybernetic feedback that gives measurement to action, science to action, connection. And so as we evolve it, I think of this as like a geospatial infrastructure on our planet. And this is an infrastructure that not only can drive businesses or government decisions, a knowledge framework that can drive these decisions and go in the right direction, or not. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. It's yeah, that's my sense of it. Yeah. Anyway, thank you again, Luis, and thank you for all the great work that
magnificent. Thank you for the opportunity.
it's good.
Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll sign off. You too. Bye.